It's time again for another installment of The Basics, and on today's show I want to get back into Magic the Gathering and explain how a three-player game works. And I've done this many times, obviously with friends. I probably will not see something like this happen in a tournament. If anyone has seen it, please let me know. But in terms of house rules, yes, you can play three players, and I will explain how it works. It's a lot simpler than you think. Now, as I've mentioned on previous episodes, my table that I film these episodes on is quite small, so I'm trying to do a three-player simulated game in a very small area on top of this table. So, basically, this is how three players works in Magic, obviously in a house rules game. Because there's an extra player, so instead of two planeswalkers going head-to-head, you have the extra player, and it doesn't matter where you sit on the table as long as you don't see into each other's hands at any given time. But basically, each player, you'd go around either clockwise or counterclockwise after rolling a die to see who goes first. You would do your turn like you normally would in a head-to-head game, drawing cards, putting down mana, playing creatures. But in this case, with the third player, when any player decides to start attacking, he would have to choose between which of the other two players he is going to attack. And that player obviously would need to defend, and then he can choose in his next turn if he wants to respond or go after the third player. Now, it does get a bit tricky because you have that third player, and you're going to have 3 times the creatures being put out depending on the colors being used and whatnot. I dare say that in the times I've played a three-player game in Magic, you really have to have a separate deck that is built just specifically for a three-player game, because you're not playing head-to-head. You have an extra variable that creates a whole set of variables. So you want to have a beefier deck that does more damage in a shorter period of time. So a red deck with a lot of the destruction spells, disintegration, and destroy artifacts would be advantageous here, which I have used. Also, because you have the 3 players and you have 3 decks going at each other, you really have to pay attention to counters as well as the life points that every player has. So again, each of you is going to need a d20 to count life points, and you really have to pay attention for counters. The first ever time, actually a few times I did a 3-player game, it got kind of messy because it was getting hard to keep track of counters. So after the third game, what I did was, and my other players in my little group agreed on, is that we kept little notepads next to each of our play areas or decks, and we would make sure we'd have notations about counters and life points in addition to the dice, just in case something happened with the dice. Because let's face it, whenever you're playing any game that involves any kind of dice, you're going to bump the table sooner or later by accident, and it's going to move the dice. So have that notepad handy. Also be aware of what the other 2 players have out on the battlefield. When you only have a head-to-head game and 1 player in front of you, you obviously know what's going on. But when you have that third player, it's an unstable element because you have the ability to get distracted with that extra player. You're focusing too much on one player and not the other one. Is a 3-player game fun? Yes, it can be a lot of fun. It also can create situations where 2 players gang up on one, etc., etc. But, you know, the pros outweigh the cons in this case. Now, that being said, one other thing that I want to talk about in regards to the 3-player game. This goes for any player in the game, do not have a deck that is solid white. Make sure it's a combination deck of white and blue or something else. White decks in 3-player games, they get killed very quickly, and this has been found out with my group of players over time, and after a while nobody brought a singular white deck to a 3-player game. It was usually combination white-blue or white-red or something, or there were 2 of us using black decks or combination black-red or black-blue, and a lot of cases a green deck here is very advantageous, or a mixed. So stay away from just straight white decks because they are actually weak in this case. Aside from some of those power cards that get rid of enchantments and artifacts, they're useless in a 3-player game. Have a great day, everybody.